A passion for movement, but over the course of my career, I sought out what I felt were some of the best movement coaches, primarily from a linear standpoint. You're really warming up. Got the heater on in the car, now you're okay. But what I did is I looked at all these linear coaches, and they were primarily track and field. And I didn't work with anybody track and field. I worked with everybody but track and field, but I wanted to take principles of what they were doing and listen to the things that they were seeing and say, okay, how can I take what they're doing from a technical model and blend that into what I do with athletes of field sport, okay? I think we can all agree that linear qualities are present in sport, but very rarely do we get to what we would consider top-end speed mechanics, and we don't want to make somebody run like an Olympic sprinter necessarily, but we want them to have concepts that have similarity. And so what I do in my preparation with my athletes is I look at it two ways. I look at myself as a general physical preparation specialist, meaning for the most part, I do have a new job coming up, but for the most part, I'm working with these athletes off season, and I'm trying to restore certain qualities. Those qualities are coordinative, those qualities are mobility, stability, those qualities are relearning patterns that maybe those athletes haven't been working on for quite some time because of getting into season play and skill play. So the way I look at the body is, if I take general locomotion strategies, and if I can be masterful in linear strategies, and then masterful in the deceleration quality of those, if I can be masterful in multi-directional movement, which primarily comprise of a blend of frontal and transverse plane motions, if I can master those movement qualities, I make a better athlete. At the end of the day, that's our job as physical preparation specialists, is we're trying to hand over to the sporting coaches a better athlete. That's my goal. So a lot of what I do, people say, well, all you're doing is rehearsing them to be a sprinter. Sprint qualities, there's a lot of great things to it. Coordinative, tempo, rhythms, elasticity, those are all the things we're trying to really maximize. Now, when I look at linear movement, I break it up into two different training opportunities. I look at what I would consider acceleration, and acceleration is a blend, right? It's all a blend into different mechanics. Every step of acceleration starts to morph into what we see at top end speed. But I have a specific day that I work on acceleration, because I don't think enough athletes get pure work on acceleration enough. A lot of times they get a lot of conditioning. What does conditioning promote? In your opinion, when we look at the mechanical model, it promotes more of a cyclical nature, more of what we would consider top end speed, but it's poor mechanics typically. We know we're going to run this for X distance. We know we're going to do it for this repeated times, so let's be worse at it. And that's what I see a lot. I see a lot of poor technique done because the athletes accommodate to the workload. So I want to reverse that model and tell my athletes, let's be the master of 5 to 10 yards of acceleration, because those are the bursts that matter. As you'll see with Ian Jeffries later, it's from change of direction then into acceleration. It's not change of direction into top end speed mechanics. So at the end of the day, how can I be the master of 5 to 10 yards, 10 meters of acceleration? And so I pepper that into my athletes, because that's all sport play is. It's a series of those things happening over and over again of start, stop, accelerate, start, stop, accelerate. Every so often we do blend into more top end speed. It doesn't happen a ton. And I guess it does matter the sport you're working with as well. But so I break it up into acceleration and then maximum velocity or top end speed. Now the good thing about both of them, you're going to hear a lot of similarities with what I talk about with them, and you'll see some similarities in themes within the drilling. We will go through a lot of techniques and drills that I think everybody in here can do and should do. Some of the drills we'll do, I'll do the drills either shoot or barefoot as well. I'm a big believer in barefoot work with my athletes. I think there's a lot to be said with the understanding of the mechanism of the foot. I'm going to discuss that a little more at length as we go on today, but I'll also talk about linear movement from a holistic nature as well. Okay, I'm a firm believer that we see common themes of injury patterns based on, I believe that we have like propulsive and absorption-based issues. Propulsive-based issues are typically soft tissue. If I'm working with an athlete and I see that athlete overstride, what do those athletes typically do? In your history of watching athletes and working with athletes? Yeah. Yep, hamstring. Bicep femoris typically as well. Bicep femoris lateral gastroc. It's a propulsion injury. They're out of position. They're propelling at the wrong position. Their base of support is landing so far ahead of their mass, and they're at such an elongated position of the bicep femoris. Plus, when they go to reach, they're usually striking fourth and fifth met, which is going to, or fourth and fifth, and that's going to put more tension on the bicep femoris. So you start to notice commonalities. Athletes who under recover, what do they typically do? Under recover meaning they swing the back leg far, far back behind them. You ever notice a trend with those athletes? Yeah, hip flexor adductors, right? Your rectus femoris is a two-joint muscle. So when that thigh drifts back, the thigh is still going back in negative acceleration as the heel is casting up to the rear end. That's putting that rectus and anything that crosses that knee, rectus and sartorius, on a significant stretch. So again, to me, it's a positional issue. It's propulsive. We're not getting back to the right position in a timely enough fashion. But we look at the adductor strains because we have brevis, longus, and pectineus, they're hip flexors as well. So those guys are being carried for the ride. So you deal with athletes that have a lot of osteitis pubis, a lot of, even sports hernias, things like that can come from a poor understanding of the recovery cycle. So a lot of times some of the soft tissue injuries can be directed to just bad mechanics. And as I said earlier, a lot of those bad mechanics are accentuated through a lot of conditioning measures. So what I'll even show today is some ways that I do condition my athletes, but I make the coordinative task a high priority. When we look at dynamic correspondence and we look at the transference of exercise, we talk about the relativeness of biomechanics, or the mechanical aspect, the coordinative aspect, and the energetic. Well, I'm going to show you a way today that I think that we can do some conditioning that can influence all three of those at one time. So to me, that's the win-win in sports preparation. And I reiterate things because the take-home message. Oh, let me also go back. So I said there's propulsive issues and there's absorption issues. Absorption issues are typically more ligamentous. Okay, the inability to control a load eccentrically, right? The inability to decelerate when we talk about high velocity change of direction in sport, and that's when we see the muscular system get pulled back, too much load against us, and now the connective tissue has got to be the ones that try to put on the brakes for us or decelerate. When we look at the highway, we have a highway on the street and we have a car going down the street. Does that car need the guardrail to stay on the road? No, it's there just in case. Well, that's how I look at your ligamentous tissues. They're there just in case. To me, the muscular system, the neuromuscular system, is the quality of the driver. If the quality of the driver is good, I don't need to rely on that guy. But if the quality of the driver is bad, then I might have to rely on that guy. So, a lot of things can bring that up, right? Wear and tear, acute injury, or acute weaknesses, fatigue, everything like that can set those things up. But at the end of the day, it's the inability to absorb force and the inability to produce force in the proper positions. So when I look at acceleration, first and foremost, acceleration and top end speed, I've got to hit home on this word on both. Posture sets up efficiency. Even though as I said, we're looking at a technical model, we're trying to back engineer maybe chronic injury patterns, things like that. And one of the best ways we can do that is to reestablish good posture position. I'll say it a few times today, but joint position dictates muscle function. The better alignment I have, the better rhythm, the better timing, and the better elasticity I have within the system as we run. Now, if we're looking at acceleration, I have what I call my 4 Ps. And this even holds true for top end speed, but my 4 Ps are simple. First one you can already figure out, it's posture. And that posture changes. When I'm in acceleration, that posture has a relative angle to it, an angulation to it. Relative angulation. When we look ear, shoulder, hip, knee, ankle. Don't hate on my artistry, just understand the themes. Posture. The second one is position. Relative to posture, there's got to be an optimal position that I go through. Well, what we know with some of the great movers and great runners is we know that there's a certain position they get to on the front side of the hip axis that gives them more leverage and greater ability to generate torque into the ground. So position is my second thing I pay attention to. To me, I try to make things as simple as possible. I try to take something that is relatively complex and see if we can make it more simple. After position, I have placement. So placement, going back to what I said about propulsion. Placement, once I've got to position, now where is my placement of my foot into the ground? Where is it? Is it under the hips? Is it behind the hips? Where is it? I definitely don't want it in front of the hips. I want it more ultimately under the hips and or behind the hips, depending on the phase of running I'm in. If I'm more in an early acceleratory phase, I'm pushing back behind the hips. It's more horizontally driven. If I'm working at more top end speed, it's more underneath the hips as I go. If you took a bicycle and you flip the bicycle upside down, everybody's done that, yes? Yeah. And I take that wheel and to get it started, I pull it, I rip it, what direction? Horizontally, to get it going. How do I keep it going? Striking vertical. Yeah. So to me, that's my acceleratory action, and that's my maximum velocity action, striking straight down. A lot of people will talk about pawing into the ground. I think that it matters on the caliber of athlete you have and their understanding of the mechanics and the co-contraction they're trying to get out of the hamstrings and glutes simultaneously. But at the end of the day, I just want to get my athletes to position and get them down to placement. So I talk about striking straight down. Now placement, what part of the foot? What part of the foot? Ball of the foot. Most athletes are where? Toe. Most athletes inherently go toes because coaches have told athletes, particularly in the States, get on your toes, get on your toes. And athletes are very literal. And athletes start to strike on their toes. We know when they start to strike on their toes, one, we know they lose the elasticity of the Achilles complex because now you've taken a relatively long lever in the foot and now you're shortening that lever by the phalanges. The other thing that you have when athletes strike here is, again, the want to overreach. They want to feel for their next step. It's like going downstairs. Nobody goes downstairs and goes ball of the foot. They go downstairs and they reach with the toes. It's a proprioceptive feel. So when the athletes start to overreach, you're going to see that casting feeling for that next step. Again, it's ball of the foot. And again, I do think that you'll see some athletes who are varimed. If an athlete's varimed, they're going to be more apt to strike fourth and fifth. That's okay. That's okay. But at least try to get them into more of a midfoot strike, in my opinion, or midfoot to forefoot. Now, when you say ball of the foot, a lot of athletes still confuse this as ball of the foot because they can feel the ball of the foot hitting the ground, but it's got to be here where we're loaded.
That's the same for both acceleration and then march.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Same position, in my opinion. Absolutely. Again, we have so much more elastic potential from that Achilles. When we have the ball of the foot, when we hit here more on the phalanges, we're going to have a lot more participation from like the flexor digitorum, flexor hallucis, but we won't have as much elasticity from the Achilles complex, in my opinion, based on the loading. So I pay attention to ultimately dorsiflexion as my key setup point into placement. Because the better dorsiflexion I have, or the better talocrural range I have there, the more stiff this ankle complex is going to be once I hit the ground. When I look at running, I don't look at it as triple extension per se. A lot of people think, strike the ground and really push off the toe. I don't think about it that way. I think about it this way, is put the ankle in a stiff, rigid position, hit the ground, have a stable foundation to allow these guys to generate more force. Because at the end of the day, when we look at jumps and we look at sprints, what are we trying to minimize for the most case? Time on the ground. We can argue in acceleration, we do want to spend more time on the ground to go through a fuller range of motion, but we don't want to spend on, we want to be compliant yet resilient at the same time. It's a give and take. So at what point are we so compliant into the ground that we're not as elastic? And we have to pay attention. The biggest thing I pay attention to with my eyes when I watch people run is timing. The timing at which, when something just doesn't look as natural, it looks like they're spending more time on the ground than they should be. The arms are delayed relative to the legs, or the legs are delayed relative to the arms. To me, there's a timing component that's off. When those timing components are off, I look at strike position, I look at thigh position, and then ultimately strength to weight ratios. Those are the things I pay attention to. And again, how they strike in the ground. If they hit more ball of the foot, from my experience, they've got more of a stable foundation when they hit the ground, and they're more elastic coming off. They have a more stable foundation to provide power into the ground. Now, how versed is everybody in here on pronation, supination of the foot? Because I think that's something we should talk about before we get into this. Yeah, kinda. Yeah. So what happens? So we have two different kinds of pronation, supination. Okay. We have open chain and we have closed chain. Open chain, closed chain pronation. They're almost opposite of each other in a weird way. So pronation. If I were to say which one is stable, which one is unstable, which would you say? If I said pronation, which one's unstable? So
Supination was stable.
Supination is more stable.
More stable.
When we're in closed chain, correct. When the foot's on the ground, a supinated foot is a locked foot. When we're on the ground, a pronated foot is an unstable foot, and it's not bad or good. It's ultimately like saying, does somebody breathe in or breathe out? They both have to happen. A pronated foot should comply and absorb to terrain, and then as we move over, as we go over into stance, the foot locks and then becomes stable, stiff and stable as we go into supination. Now, when the foot's off the ground, so the rules are this. A pronated foot, by definition, is dorsiflexion, right? My foot's dorsiflexed right now because the earth is pushing up on it. It's slight abduction, or it's adduction of midfoot, and then abduction of forefoot. A pronated foot is collapsing of the arch, okay? When the arch collapses, the phalanges abduct. There's three phases to the foot. There's a rear foot, a midfoot, and a forefoot. They don't move as one. And that's what people always show when they show open stance, open chain. They'll show the foot moving as one. It doesn't move that way. It's triplanar. It's triplanar, so the foot needs to go through an ability to be compliant to the ground and then to be stiff and lock. We want that. In training, we're always going for stiffness, right? We're always training stiffness, how stiff, how stiff. Well, there's got to be an element of compliance too, because it's got to go from relaxed to rigid. That's how we do everything in our profession. And we need to have good sense of mobility through the foot, otherwise we end up with different issues up the chain as well. So actually, everybody stand up real quick. You can keep your shoes on, or you can take them off however you want. So this is what I want everybody to do. We're gonna go arms across our shoulders, and all I want you to do is rotate to your right. Rotate to your right. When you rotate it to your right, your left foot just pronated, your right foot supinated. You feel the difference where that left foot just, that navicular's pushing into the track, and that right foot, now you're creating that arch. Now go back the other way. Now when we do that, when we go into that pronation, the rear foot, what did it just do? It everted on the left foot. If this is my calcaneus, it just everted. That means my navicular just pronated to the floor. That shows you right there that there's triplanar movement in that foot. And the reason why that's important is because, what did I say we want to try to minimize when we hit the ground and jumping and sprinting?
The time.
Yeah, amortization, right? We want to minimize amortization. the more compliant or the more mobile of a foot I have, plus a more stable foot, the less time I'll spend on the ground. Now, if we can teach our athletes to prepare for ground contact by pre-activating in the dorsiflexion, we just took the middle guy out. A lot of athletes will drop, absorb, stiff, and roll off. My thinking and thought process, as you'll see when we drill, is always toe up, hit and drive. So I'm trying to minimize amortization by setting up the foot into a locked foot. So the reason why I bring this whole thing up, because pronation on the ground is an unlocked foot. Pronation off the ground, it's a locked foot. Supination, that's an unstable foot off the ground. Has everything to do with what's being pushed into. So people get confused on pronation, supination being a stable versus unstable. Has everything to do with context of where the foot is. So a pronated foot on the ground is unstable, and then we get stiff and we go into supination. A supinated foot off the ground, that's an unstable foot, but a pronated foot off the ground, that is a very stable foot. That was all just on placement, wow. And the last one is patterning. Patterning, this is probably the most important overlooked part in any fundamental movement sessions I watch. It's simple marching and skipping patterns. It's all it is. Patterning, rhythmic tempos. The more rhythmic we are, the more elastic we become. And one of my mentors showed me this one a long time ago. He said, take your index finger, hit it down onto the board as fast and as hard as you can, then relax it and do the same. He says, that's efficient. That's using the storage of elasticity. And that's how when you hear great track coaches talk about being relaxed, that's what we're talking about. Staying relaxed so we can maximize the storage of elasticity. So using the stretch shortening cycle, understanding how to have relaxed tempos to maximize elasticity. And so many of my drills are really predicated on that aspect. So posture, position, placement, and patterning. These are the 4 P's that I look for in acceleration and that I look for in top end speed. Now the first thing we're gonna do, I'd say about 80% of what we're gonna do today, everybody will be able to do it. It won't be high velocity work, it's just gonna be working on these 4 things, and then I'm gonna show you how I progress them into things that do have a little bit more oomph to them, okay? How many people are gonna probably try and do everything today from effort, or like a sprint aspect? I got one for sure. I saw you on the bike already. Anybody else?
If you don't go, so I'll follow.
So here's what we're gonna do. I'd say let's try and get as many people as we can early on, starting with this, and then you guys just pull yourselves out as we go. So let's grab a dowel. We'll start down here at the yellow cones. So, what's that?
It's not going to be too violent.
No. Not early. You guys you've had a long week. Always.
Oh, you're my friend. You are.
I'm who? What?
Crazy. You guys think about it. Yeah, they're pretty true. I do remember. Same top.
All right, guys, here's what we'll do. So, going back to what I feel, I'd say early on when I started teaching speed, it was like, hey, let's get down and go, right? Let's do our wall drills, let's get down and go. And the more I understand how complex the body is, the more I understand we have to really go back and redefine what we feel posture is when we look at sprint technique. To me, one of the most important things that I try to try to get out my athletes in the dowel drills that we're about to do is just understanding stance leg, lift leg. And understanding that I want to try and get this split into hip flexion, hip extension. I'm trying to work on these mobility qualities. We can sit there and stretch and do all of our psoas stretches, but I want to put them into a little bit more functional or transferable aspect. So we'll start here at the yellow cones, and since you put the cameras there, we'll go that way. So put the dowels on our shoulder, and all I want you guys to do is take walking steps and framing every step. When I say framing every step, here's what I'm looking for. Thigh up, toe up, heel up, knee up, tall on the down leg. Frame the leg, figure 4, boom. Again, making posture emphasis. Toe up, toe is up every time, and take yourself just into a walking tempo. Making sure that we get the foot out in front. When I say out in front, it's right underneath the knee. We'll take it 10 meters. I remember you from last time I was here. Good to see you, sir. Great to see you. Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And what I do is I start to notice different qualities on the athletes. Inability to dorsiflex the foot. Why is it? Right? Some people dorsiflex, some people don't. Some people drop. Is it a neuromuscular thing? Is it an awareness issue, or is it a previous injury? Who knows? There's a lot of reasons why somebody might not be able to dorsiflex the foot. But I keep working on it. It could be talus position. It could be history of ankle sprains. Well, from what I've paid attention to with my athletes, if I have somebody that has a history of ankle sprains, they start to lose dorsiflexion. When they start to lose dorsiflexion, the knee becomes the culprit. Okay? A lot of patellofemoral syndrome, patellar tendinosis tends to follow a lot of ankle sprains and lack of range of motion in the ankle joint. So one thing that I want to make sure that I do is I'm always reinforcing good dorsiflexion. But as you saw when we were taking a walking tempo here, how did I wanted you guys to stay flat-footed on that down leg. That pronation, supination that I showed you guys, it's a teeter-totter. It's a balance point. Too much pronation is bad, too much supination is bad. We've got to find the middle ground. These walking drills help us find a middle stable ground of balance in a teeter-totter of pronation, supination. Let's do the same thing coming back. I want you to do me a favor. Pay attention to maybe why you abduct so much in the forefoot. Cool? Ready? Flat-footed. Flat-footed. I want it flat-footed, and here's why. Your placement into the ground needs to match the speed at which you're moving. We would not walk toe, heel. We would walk more heel toe. So I'm actually okay with more of a heel strike, believe it or not. It's flat-footed or more heel pressure. It sounds backwards, I know. But the degree of speed that we travel at will change the degree or where we are on the foot. When we walk, we heel strike. When we jog, we midfoot strike. And when we sprint, we're more midfoot, forefoot strike. So we move up on that foot to gain more leverage characteristics from the Achilles. Good. Chest up, eyes up. And you'll start recognizing a few things on yourself. Differences in ability to hold, balance. All right, now let's take it to a skipping tempo. Same idea, we'll take our dowel, and now we're gonna start getting to more of that ball of the foot contact. Now we're taking it more skipping tempos. So same thing, I'm toe up, heel up, knee up. I'm trying to get the split here, and then striking back underneath my hips. Now this is more of an acceleration drill, right? Because the difference between acceleration and top end speed, what is the pattern of the leg? In acceleration, we're more piston driven. There's no heel to my butt action. Top end speed, we start to close that gap. In between acceleration and top end speed, we have characteristics of acceleration that start to blend to that maximum velocity look of that cyclical action. Every step we take, if I accelerate and I'm at a lean, let's just assume 45-degree lean. Every step I take, my torso angles will start to change. As my torso angles start to change, so do my thigh angles. When we're in acceleration, our thigh position will most likely be perpendicular for punching out correctly. But most people try to raise that thigh, get as up as high as they can. With the angle that they're at with their position, they're setting themselves up for failure. Here's why. Each step from acceleration should do this. Boom, 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 boom. As my torso raises, my thigh lifts. If somebody comes out of step one with a big, high thigh position, what's going to happen on their next subsequent steps? They're going to drop down. So they're going to lose leverage and propulsion ability, or the ability to climb out of the hole based on an inappropriate coaching cue. Really get that thigh up there. How many times have we done that as coaches? Lift those knees, get that thigh up. It's got to be appropriate angles. It's got to be similar angles to what we want. It's still perpendicular to the angle of the torso, and then as I raise, same thing happens. Make sense?
So by piston, you mean right leg left acceleration. When you pull up, then you go just like.
So, and don't, like we classify them from drilling aspects as they're two separate things. This is piston based, and it happens typically, I'll try not to step on my shoelace, but it happens typically the first couple steps, punching and driving. But most athletes coming out of this stance that I just did, you know what they'll do? They start to pull their heel up to their butt like they're at top end speed. You can hear it on mondo surfaces like this, and you can see it because they'll kip over. They'll almost fall. Because it's not complementary angles. They're spinning too much backside, and they're getting more forward momentum over. And that's why you see athletes a lot of times come out of a break, and if they're cyclical, they'll almost stumble over themselves. But if they're piston action, they're stable, stiff, and ready. So let's take it to the Dow A skips again. So double skip rhythm, I'll show it one more time. So piston action, my heel is not coming up to my butt. I'm not trying to waste time back here, not right now. Ready, go. Good, walk it back and we'll do it again. Walk it back and we'll do it again. And what you'll find is I have picked about 4 drills from an acceleration standpoint, 4 drills from a top end speed standpoint, and I groove the heck out of them. I get good at grooving just a handful of drills. Ready, go. Go up, try that ground. Good, paying attention to your own cadence. Listening to rhythmic tempos of the feet. Listening to rhythmic tempos of the feet hitting the ground. You know when you hear a rhythmic sound versus non-rhythmic. Really? Yes, sir.
How much are you driving down on that, or are we just working on the rhythm?
Yeah, I'm just working on tempo. So I do see that a lot where coaches say, really drive that ground. I want to hear that foot hit the ground. Couple things. When you hear the foot hit the ground when somebody's sprinting and it's loud, you know what that typically is?
Too much ground.
Too much ground contact time, inappropriate placement of the foot, inappropriate slap of the foot is typically what it is. So it's a poor cue in a lot of cases. So on a drill such as this, as I told you get back down to the ground, right? Because you're kind of just drifting up here. I still want my athletes to understand I need to get up and get back down. It's here. I still want to get back down, but I'm not hitting there. That's surface area a lot of times, or too much time on the ground. The inability to use good elasticity. So walk back, let's get one more. So, has anybody asked why we use the PVC, the dowels yet? Posture. Posture. And the other thing, the reason why I like using I got these from some coaches who I really love and use as mentors down at Altus. To me, sometimes the arm carriage can distract what you see through the trunk. So I kind of like to take away the arms just so I can see what's happening here. We all know at the end of the day, this is a system of coordination. So I'm not trying to be hypocritical of what my stance was from a rhythmic standpoint, but it's a nice way to look at can they get good stacking of hip and shoulders, and what is their element of trunk stability? Because as athletes start to use their arms, you can mask a lot of balance issues when they come out of a start. You can mask a lot of bad positional issues with your arms. And you'll see that when we get into acceleration. We're going to accelerate with the PVCs, I always say PVCs, but with the dowels on our back. And you'll get a sense of who has not enough hip projection, because you're almost going to fall on your face. So it's a good feedback tool. Ready? One more time. Go. Toe up, left side. Thigh up, foot out in front of you. And try not to cycle your leg back down though. So don't get to here and cycle it down, right? We just want to get from here to here. Now a couple things we'll see on these skips is we'll see athletes coming up and they'll pull here. Is that wrong? I don't think it's wrong, but I don't think it's maximizing optimal angles. If I can get to 90 degrees hip, 90 degree knee, 90 degree angle, what do we know about 90 degree angles? The greatest leverage for torque. So if I've got 3 joints that strike the ground after being preloaded in that position, I've got more bite into the ground, especially when I start to turn myself horizontal. So instead of striking here, I think when athletes pull up to here, they strike more straight down. I think when we get here, we get more of this complementary effect of co-contraction of hamstring, glute, and even quads at that point. I think when athletes pull here and they strike down, it's a lot more quad dominant in my opinion. And I think that's the other reason why you'll hear a loud foot. They're not getting enough posterior chain drive. Let's go ahead and walk it back now. We'll put the PVCs just behind us, and now let's start incorporating arm rhythm. All right. Now we incorporate a little bit of arm action here. The arms, when we move our arms, what are they? Front to back action, side to side, front to back. Where's our axis of motion mainly? The glenohumeral joint, right? Here. Now, what's my arm action in the front? I come in. So I don't want to go here, because if I've got an athlete who's pretty broad, that's going to create a lot of torque, a lot of rotation. We want to utilize rotational moment to move us here. However, but we want to create that rotational moment at the right time. So moving in this direction, I shorten into the pecs. The pecs horizontally adduct. So as I bring my arm swing, I bring it in toward midline, and then I bring it out. In toward midline, bring it out. Because as I drive back, I've got great storage of elasticity here in the pec and the bicep, and that snaps you on right back up. So instead of here, it's a little bit in. Now what do we know about levers? Longer lever generates more force, shorter lever rotates faster around an axis, right? So when I front swing, I bend my elbow shorter than 90. When I back swing, it's greater than 90. Maximize your leverage characteristics. My arm action doesn't come up to my head and my eyes. It comes up to about my chin and then back past my hip. My arms I'm not straightening the elbow. I'm keeping bend and tension on the elbow. That way I've got good tension here to swing the arm forward. When I talk to my athletes about arm action, I say there's only one direction we drive the arms. What direction is it? Back. Back. I teach them back because back elicits extension of the leg. When we have athletes that are very heavy on the front side, they spend a lot of time on the back side with the leg as far as a delayed recovery action. When they drive here, they push more fully through the hip. And that back, it's hand back. A lot of people try to get jogger's arm and drive here. It's hand back. Cool? So let's go ahead and take skipping tempo with arm action. Posture's a priority. Yep. Foot out in front a little bit more. Do yourself those same arms and legs. Did you feel that? Is it really? Walking back. Walking back, let's do it again. Ready? Go. Try to switch your arms and legs. What age athletes does everybody work with in here? All over the board?
Teenage, high school.
Teenage? Okay. About across the board? Any middle school or before high school?
About 12-year-old.
Okay, cool. So a couple things you'll see. One, you'll see it even in the high schoolers, but you'll see a lot of ipsilateral patterns in skipping, right? See that? And that's an easy one to fix. Obviously, you'll make them aware of it, but I just have them start walking. Have them start walking and not thinking about it, and they'll go into an opposing pattern. But a lot of times when the athletes are consumed, they start going into that ipsilateral pattern. Walking back. I don't know if you felt that at all. You were saying arm, same leg. I don't know if you felt it. Yeah, great question. I guess both, but it's more for recovery. And this is exactly how I do a training session. Yeah, coach was just asking me, why am I having you walk back? And that it's just active recovery within a session, right? I think too many times coaches are like, it's a speed session, let's go, go, go. No, I want to optimize rest and recovery so technique can be sound. Let's go one more time here. Ready? Go. Foot out in front of you. Left foot. There. Feel that? Good. Lift that in front. Lift that side. All right, walk it back one more time. Now grab your I want to keep saying PVC. Grab your dowel.
Just say PVC.
It's all I use is PVCs.
Now we're having an argument here.
Yes.
Thinking about your arms or thinking about your leg?
Neither. Actually, you know what? Neither. No, you know what?
Not the best
So,
you've got all
no, let me tell you something. That's a great question, though, because to me, which one's more complex? Leg action is more complex. One of the biggest cues I use with all my athletes, especially when I'm getting ready for the NFL Combine, I have a 6 to 8 window to get them very, very fast. I've got to be quick with my cueing, and I've got to be what's going to take care of the most problems. Usually if you take care of arm action, it does take care of leg action. Because there is a rhythm with both. And as I mentioned earlier, if arm action is too far forward, they spend too much time back. If arm action is too far back, they spend too much time front. If I find the happy medium, it usually cleans up the leg cycle.
Is that why you say their posture's priority? Because posture take care of well?
Yeah, and there's a lot of other reasons as well. From like what I talked about earlier with like the deep flexors and pubitis issues that a lot of athletes run into because they're maybe extremely posteriorly tilted, or they've got hyperlordotic and they're drawn in here. Once I can get posture, now I can get the natural elasticity of that tissue to fire at normal length and positions without as much strain against them. But I talk, if we have something, I'll show it in some wall drills in a second. If we have somebody that's excessively kyphotic, what happens to their pelvis? It posteriorly tilts. And everything has a harmony. Have you ever watched somebody vertical jump with looking down? What can't they do? They can't extend their hips. Yeah, it's the same thing. If we have somebody who's here, their pelvis is going to posteriorly tilt. And if the pelvis posteriorly tilt, I said it earlier, joint position dictates what? Muscle function. So if I'm kyphotic, pelvis is posteriorly tilted, what can't the glutes do? Extend the hips very well. And what do we know about acceleration? The goal is to push back to get posterior drive of hamstrings and glutes. But if you don't have good postural control, particularly in those high school kids that you guys work with, I know I see it in my college kids who, maybe spend a lot of time on the upper body here, or they're just unaware of their posture, and this is how they walk around. But it's hard for them to get that extension, not to mention the habits they create in the weight room, right? They squat and they come to here. Well, they're always shortened here. And so they're unable to get these split positions I talk about without having a significant amount of strain on the hip flexors and without that harmony. You'll see somebody run. You guys have curved treadmills, you know what I'm talking about, the Woodway curves? It's a great tool to just watch from a frontal plane and just see the thigh swing back. And somebody who's really tight in the hip flexors, you'll see it prematurely lift the thigh. There needs to be a nice element to swing back before it initiates back up. When you see somebody prematurely come up, usually they're so tight on the anterior side that they can't extend back. They can over time if you're working and rehearsing on these drills. And a lot of my specific exercises in the weight room are meant at doing this. I do a lot of single-legged hip thrusts that are meant at creating this extension flexion pattern and this mobility. I can show you guys some of this stuff later if you want. Okay, so now let's take the dowel, PVC, whatever we want to call it, and now we're just going to go into a single exchange. So we'll start with the first group up, and you guys are just going to start and stick. Whoop. So now we're just going to start and stick, but don't go to the next step until you're stuck. Make sense? Thigh positions here. I'm not casting out. I'm just switching and exchanging. What's that? Flat foot. Flat foot, but toe up every time in the air. Yeah, just like that. But try not to cast. You know what I mean? Try not to do this. Try to go to here. Yep. 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 Beautiful. Here we go. Don't stop the ground. Flat-footed. Boom. Now, let's talk about, you're really drawn into this. You feel that? We talk about the kinetic chain all the time, right? The ability to have single leg stability and strength. This is a fantastic exercise to really promote and work on that. Good. Foot out in front of you a little bit. So right there. Foot out in front. There you go. Foot out in front. There. Feel that? There you go. Good. Cool. Welcome back. Next one we're going to do is a double exchange. So people talk about this in our field all the time. Mastering fundamentals, right? But do we really master fundamentals? Never. People talk a great game in our industry about it. This is the same stuff I do with any of my elites. Like, I rewrite the script for them. We go back and do these every offseason because their fundamentals get softened in the season. Injuries, awareness, other skills that they work on. What's a greater skill in sport than sprinting? Right? In most sports, it's king. In most sports.
And a lot of probably sports here, you might be exposed to it for a couple of sessions.
Yeah.
And it's something to say, right, we're going to concentrate on this. But then if results aren't going right, the manager's like, get that away.
Condition.
We need to forget about that stuff and come back to that, and they never do.
Yeah, which is ironic, right?
Yeah.
Because the more efficient you learn how to sprint, the better your conditioning gets. It's ironic. And less injury pathology, and less pathology you can have. So now let's take it to a 2 count. So we're going to start with right leg up. And if you have to double clutch like that, that's fine. Whoop. So we'll take it to 2 count. Start right leg up. On you. Try to punch the second leg up the same height though. Flat-footed. Tall in the hip. That's harder than it looks. Let's walk it back and we're going to go the other leg. It's a lot harder there. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think you should slow this down.
Now we're going to switch to the other leg. And you'll pay attention to yourself too, of what side you have a little bit more stability, a little bit more control on. But what's our number one priority? Number one priority? Posture. What are the 4 P's? Can you guys remember without looking?
Posture, placement,
Position.
So let's go in order. Posture, position, placement, and then pattern, the tempo of our feet. On you guys. Good. Try to stick the ground more flat-footed. Try to make an exchange and not a march. Not easy. So here's what happens too in our industry. I used to do this all the time when I'm a coach. An athlete wouldn't get something, an athlete wouldn't get an exercise well, and what do? Yeah, you label the athlete as a motor moron. You label him as a motor moron, and then you go to the next thing, right? Well, what I've learned is if the athlete didn't get the drill, I didn't expose them to the drill long enough. I maybe didn't explain it well enough. Maybe I didn't show it well enough. And so for me, I always put the onus on me as a coach. The athlete wasn't getting it, why were the reasons? Was there a postural limitation? Was there a proprioceptive awareness? Or was it just like a new novel skill that they hadn't done? Let's go back now, let's get a 3 count. Believe it or not though, you're gonna find a 3 count's easier. Yeah, because it doesn't disrupt your rhythm like the 1 and 2. Let me watch it. Try not to. So remember, we're not concerned with horizontal momentum here. We're just concerned on 4 things: posture, position, placement, and timing or patterning. I could have said timing, but I had to have another P. Ready? Let's get a 3 count. Right, start right leg up. Yep. Get back down to the ground though. Don't just high knee it. Boom, boom, boom. Yes. There you go. You like that one. Eyes up. Everybody's in the floor. Oh, I see. So you're almost wanting to march. That's exactly what you're trying to do. Instead of almost like a running place, you're almost trying to just march it. That's what's happening. Again, I think it's just one of those things, like it's not wrong, it's just a different skill, it's a different drill. All right, so who are my runners today? Do I only have 1 runner?
Oh, yes, you need us running as well. Try it.
I just need 1 or 2. So here's what we're gonna do. Remind me your first name. Kira. And your first name? College. All right, if you guys want to watch from the side, when you watch movement, what plane do you watch in? Move around. Move around. Now, if I'm looking at acceleration, my number 1 priority is frontal plane first. Because at the end of the day, a frontal plane tells me a story. The story that I'm trying to have it tell me is this. That's the story I'm trying to have it tell me, right? But if I'm watching them straight ahead, I might not be able to see that. They might look like this, but they might be here. So I watch from frontal plane, but I do move around because there's certain qualities I look for. Then once I know an athlete's getting good projection, they're getting the right mechanics, then I'll start and watch them from a sagittal plane. And I'll pay attention to their timing coming up out of the hole. Remember what I said earlier about the torso position and thigh position? How as every step we take, we start to get more vertical. We just don't hold that position. We can't defy the laws of physics. So as we come up, the thigh comes up. So what should I see as they're running towards me? I should see a natural climb out of a hole. And that's what I pay attention to, is the rhythm at which they come out of that hole. So we're gonna start here in a 2-point start, and I want you just to accelerate for me for 5 to 10 meters.
Like this, with this one down, huh?
Yeah, we'll go one person at a time. I love it, love it. You're showing me exactly what I don't want to see. I love it. Here we go. Same thing. So, oh, it's so beautiful. So this is why I take the arms away. What did you almost do? You almost ate shit. Can I say that? And the reason why, when he came out here, what was his leg action? It was sickly. It was more heel to butt. He was getting the heel lift to butt. So when he goes heel lift to butt, where's his torso going? Down. If he was using his arms, he could counterbalance that. And that's what athletes always do, is they make up for bad positions by having counterbalance with the arm swing. Remove the arms, see what happens. So let's see what happens if you get a little bit more thigh punch forward and avoid the heel carry up to your rear end. Where's the heel? Go again.
Oh, you want me to run naturally without thinking?
Right.
You want
Don't think. I wonder what. Are you good, Ron? You got really good mechanics. Are you good?
Yeah.
I've been watching all your drilling. You've got really good positions that you hit. And a lot of times what you see an athlete do in drilling, they'll do when they start running as well. And it's on, make it on you. Don't do anything crazy. Yeah. So a little bit of, he gets the thigh position, get a little toe drag, a little Usain Bolt, and then he really elongates back. What I'll do is I'll get set up here, I'll load up, and it's, so I'm trying to climb out of the hole with my thighs, right? I'm trying to climb out of the hole. What was the difference between my run and their run? I didn't spend as much time backside. I pushed, and then I got right back up, correct? Yeah. Which they did is they drift. And what I said earlier, when you drift, one, your thigh angle is going to be lower every step. This is a timing thing. If I delay here, I can't get back up here if I'm delayed back there. Everything's based on the side. You have to back engineer it. What preceded where you should have been? If I'm high on the backswing, there's no way in hell I'm going to get the thigh up. But if I get the thigh up, or if I push and pull up, I get the thigh in the right position. But if I drift, it's going to be low. So understand that, like the setup of that recovery is going to set up where you're able to pull that hammer back to. I always say when the hammer strikes higher, when the hammer swings higher, we can strike with more force to the ground. But it's relative to the lean I'm at. Let's get 2 more runs. And I want you to think about, for sure, starting with a little bit more shin angle on your lead leg. And as you come out, think about punching the knee and the foot forward. Knee and the foot forward. And then driving back behind you. That little, yeah, you can feel it, right? Here's what we'll do. Let's do this.
You want to get break out of it?
We'll say that again?
You want to get the guy
No. Carry as long as you can. Now what will determine how long you can carry acceleration? Really two main things. What's your ankle mobility on that first step? Dorsiflexion capability, but what is your relative strength? Number one thing to determine who can hold longer. Let me grab my phone real quick, and what we'll do, since there's only a few of us here, why don't we video, and I'll slow down what I'm talking about. Does that sound cool?
Yep.
Okay.
Loren, are you saying that what you want is, say on my next run, you want me to dig out of the hole by driving my thigh forward?
Yes.
And up.
Yes.
And out.
More forward than up, though.
So on my last run, I was rotating.
Yes.
Not extending.
You give extension, but then immediately pull up into hip flexion.
Will I lose leg extension if I do that?
It's always going to be a Rob Peter and Pay Paul scenario, but where can you get maximal power? Will you video my movement? Try not to lose this stuff. Oh, I didn't see that. I don't know. Just we good?
Over up there.
Probably battery came out. All right, now let's take a look at this. Okay. All right, so, oh, that's me. Okay, let's see, do I screw it up? Boom. See my position there? Position there? Boom. Is my heel coming up to my ass?
No.
My angle of my torso, finish the push and extension. This foot's in dorsiflexion, strike back down, and it's behind me. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we can sit there and argue that it's behind, but I'm pushing. We can argue that it's down, but I'm actually pushing behind me. Not bad for 45. Shit. And watch the difference here. See that heel? See that? You guys see that?
So
it's about driving the knee forward as opposed to
Yes.
cycling the leg.
100%. Trying to maximize those angles.
No, his improved.
Agreed, right?
Yeah, his has improved big time.
Yep.
That torso angle there now,
No, it didn't improve.
Yeah, that's not going to help either.
straight away from the.
Yeah. And we'll go back to mine real quick in a sec, because you'll see what sets up mine. See, like, your name?
John.
John? Yeah, so we'll load you up a little bit. I'll go back to mine in a second.
Well, I'm not worried about my torso angle. It's my angle of release that matters.
Yeah, but torso's going to... Yeah.
So here's my release angle.
Yeah, that's good, but then watch that heel starts to flip right to your ass.
Yeah, that's too right.
Okay? And so then you're a little bit shallow on the thigh position. And then,
It's just a knock-on effect of bad start.
Overthinking all this.
yeah. So, I think the biggest difference what I do is see how I'm loaded on that front leg, and then look at my back leg. See how I'm loaded on it too? I can push off both feet now simultaneously as I come out too.
That looks very vertically directed to me.
Vertically directed?
Like if you look, like if you watch your shin or your front leg, and as it strikes down, look at the shin angle. Oh no, that's not bad.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
It should be. That was maybe a little forward, right? Well, it's still not bad, right? It's a little forward. I'm old. I'm old. I didn't warm up. Shit. I haven't slept today. It's 3:30.
Compare yourself to Claudio. Claudio's the same age.
No, I'm older.
I'm old.
What age is he?
Okay, so now let's have a little fun with the guys who just went with the PVC. Thank you guys, because that's not easy to do. Now let's come out with the arms. Now let's actually allow you guys to be more mechanically advantaged. So we'll load up, set up, and that will help with, you're not going to have much of a stomping down anymore. You're going to have more projection now. No thinking. Now, let's talk about that, right? That's a very good point. Sometimes as coaches, we screw up our athletes, right? By thinking about this, think about that, think about this. So what I do is I set them up in position, and for you guys, I'm going to tell you a lot more than I tell my athletes. I don't break it down to my athletes like this. Once they start mastering position, I get behind them, make it reactive. Make it reactive, see if they can find positions. And I don't give a lot of cues when they come back. I'm like, hey, that was great, try this now. Exaggerate what I want. That's usually my number one goal, my number one cue, exaggerate what I want. Ready? Chest up a little bit. I still think for a 2-point that you want to set up, I don't think you want to be here. I do think you want to be here, because the way I look at it is it's less parts moving. We can argue that going from here to here, I get a forced couple of the extensors of the back and the hip extensors. However, I'm just trying to groove a pattern right now. So let's try and do that. Ready? Other arm. There you go. There you go. I'll do one more. I'll load up. Load to the hips, I load to the back leg. Punch strap. And again, I'm not concerned with 10 meters. I'm concerned with 2 steps, 3 steps. That's what I care about the most. Now, we're talking race strategy, but if we don't hit the first couple steps good, like the rest of the race isn't going to be clean if we're not talking about training. So I really put a huge emphasis in what happens step 1, step 2, step 3. I think it's pretty important.
Athletes speak with the first step a little bit easier. Just watching them, they look at their first step was improved, the second and third one, but then as soon as you got the second and third step, they just fell back.
Yeah, 100%. That's a great point. Like athletes will gravitate, or they'll put good emphasis into 1 or 2 steps and not feel that blend yet. It just takes time. It's feedback, back and forth from coach to athlete. The thing that I love is my athletes are exposed to this. You know, more of a model is they'll come back and say, "Oh, I know exactly what I did there." Like I have athletes that can tell me when they're pulling their heel up to the butt because they can feel the loss of power. Because once you start finding power, it's night and day difference it's hard to revert back to bad mechanics once you feel it right. Do we have elastic bands? Like any accommodating resistance bands? Did you guys use video a lot back and forth with athletes, or at least for yourself? Yeah. And you can pick up some really cool things from video. One thing that a mentor of mine, Dan Paff, always said, he goes, a couple things. Sometimes we get so hyper aware in slow-mo. Don't look at slow-mo too often because it's taking away context of rhythm. You know, oh, this is out of position. Well, if you actually watch it in real time, it's not out of position. It was the right timing. But also watch things in front to back as well. Because again, you can see, you know, thigh positions pretty well, how clean they push back in that thigh angle. Oh, perfect. So now we can take this, so now we can say, I go back and forth between a lot of my posture and positioning drills, and then I'll go back and forth to some sprint action, and then take them also into a little bit of, I don't want to say towing work, because it's more reinforcement of mechanics. And I think this kind of stuff right here is really what helps the athletes. Well, that might be too much resistance. Let me give you a thought. John, do you mind resisting him? So, try that one first. So, I love these drills right here. They're probably my bread and butter. All we're going to do is we're just going to march with that elastomer against us. So all you're going to do, John, is provide him resistance that you can lean, and just begin a marching tempo, but begin with a lean. Yep. Yep. So let's start back a little bit. Now, feet together. There you go. Engage. There you go, chest up. You got chin down. Chin down. There you go. Hips forward. There you go, fall forward. There you go. Now begin marching. Arm action. Boom, push back. Push back. Good, get right foot out front. Good, let's do that again. So you'll hear me say little things. And when I told him to get right foot out in front, you saw him being able to get more extension back into the ground?
Is he better there in right foot than there?
At the beginning, he was worse on his right. By the end, he got better on his right. Yep. Let's do that again. So, there you go. So up. Good. Let's go one more time. And I want you to get taller through the hips before you initiate your lean. And I want to avoid this position with the chin. More neutral.
Look down.
Not down, but neutral. You can look down, but it's more like forward toward those cones.
Loren, is that kind of foot contact sound right here?
It's different now because we're marching. Foot out in front and push back behind you. So the number one thing I'm looking at right now, is he able to get extension through the legs? And yes, he is. He's setting up on the front end, and now he's getting extension. If I were to be critical, now I'd say, okay, let's go a little bit more tone in the elbow instead of flowing the arms open. Keep a little more tone in the elbow so you get a little more purposeful drive from the arms. So not extending, but keeping a little bit more tone. Your arms are just kind of doing this.
Okay. So stiffen. Yeah.
Yeah, stiff and more rigid, exactly.
Loren, are you happy with the dorsiflexion when he comes up?
A little off. Yeah. And to me, it's like this is a game of repetition. When I'm working on mechanics, it's every day. It's every day. Toe up, heel up, knee up. We do these drills every day in warm-ups, and then we have 2 speed days. One's an acceleration day, one's a top-end speed day. So they're hearing it often. This stuff takes a long time to groove. And that's when we talk about fundamental practices. I don't think enough people spend enough time on each of these things. They just move to the next. Yeah. There you go. Drive the arms back.
Elbow.
There you go. That was pretty interesting. He went ipsilateral at some point in time in there and then got back to contralateral. What was that?
How many cues maximum would you give him working with him? Like say if you were working with him, just to not overload.
One. And one thing you'd find if you were watching me coach is he might do this 6 times and I won't say a word to him. Because I just want to see how he adapts, how he adjusts as he goes. Okay? And then I might come back and say, you know what, that was really good, got great rhythm, great timing, but you know what, do me a favor, give me a little bit more arm drive back.
You might get a feel for it, probably only up to 5 meters, then you kind of move into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you overcue, you probably just.
Oh.
Well, for me anyway, I know.
It's too much information. You can't process it all. Let's get it one more time if you don't mind. You still doing good here?
Me? Yeah.
John, will you give him just a little bit more resistance now?
Yeah.
So still try to lean as aggressively, but John's going to give you more resistance, so now you have to push back. So when somebody starts giving you more resistance, you have to find the right angles. Otherwise, you're not going to move very well. So these are good drills to teach to help break them of maybe that high heel lift. You can still see on the left side, he really likes to do that. And you'll see athletes that will gravitate to, one side over another, maybe doing more of a heel lift. And it just takes time to kind of break that a little bit.
That drill, what kind of tempo would you want that?
Tempo?
In terms of how quick? Slower march or?
No, just what he was doing. Because a lot of times people will confuse like, oh, this is a speed drill, so we do it fast. No, I want to see good, clean, full range of motion. And I always say smooth is fast. Even when my athletes are running, smooth is fast. When they try to get fast and choppy, it's slow. They don't elongate. They're not as elastic. They don't cover as much distance. Let's go. Let's get one more march, and then I'll take you to a run. Now I'll play back and forth with these exercises because I think these exercises provide context of how we sprint. Arms right back, back. There you go. Good. So we're starting to get a little bit cleaner pattern of less heel butt action. Again, a lot of things still need to clean up from arm action, some postural changes that happen as he goes. I would spend even more time on rhythm and tempos. People will ask too about the resistance of the band. Should you wear a shoulder harness, a waist harness? I don't like a shoulder harness because, I don't like it. I like a waist harness because it forces them, one, to be engaged through the trunk a little bit more, but it doesn't pull them too vertical too soon. Now, if the guy resisting isn't doing his part, you lose your angle and you can't produce. If we don't start in a good angle, we can't create the 5 position and we can't drive back. If I'm trying to do these drills vertically, like we saw when we had the dowel, I'm hitting the action, but I'm not hitting the direction. Would you agree? Once I get the lean, now I can hit the direction of pushing back. And that's why John is just as important as the guy doing the drill. A lot of coaches or athletes just kind of sit here, like you've got to be really skillful with the resistance you're giving. Now, we can take it, we'll go a little bit lighter band, and we'll take it to almost like a run in place. When I say run in place, that one. When I say run in place, when I turn this into a run, everybody, your natural thought is to pull John down the track, and that's not what I want. I want you to utilize his resistance so you can maximize repetition in a 5 meter space. Okay? Don't beat the snot out of the ground. Tempo. And look what he wants to do. He wants to go right back to what? Heel carriage. The heel high, right? So now you know it. So now let's remove it. So exaggerate what I want. John, just give him a tad more resistance and but it's not toe down. Exaggerate what I want. Better. Subtle changes. Now, one thing you'll hear me say, if we don't start in a good position, we're not going to find a good position as we go. So be a little bit more purposeful in your setup and then begin the leg action. You kind of get set up and then you go. Try to avoid breaking at the hip. Yeah. Now do it again. That was perfect on your step. Now execute the knee forward and foot forward a little more. Take your time. Yeah. Could you guys see a difference there in the carriage of the heel? Much better. The cool thing is it's going to be feedback to the resistor because he's going to get dragged. When you start hitting the right positions, you're going to drag him. It's night and day when you hit the right angles. That was better. Let's go one more. You cool with that?
Yeah.
It's 3:30 in the morning right now. Am I done? What time do I go to? Yep. There you go. Exaggerate. Yes. Good. This takes time. A shitload of time. Now, one thing people say to me is like, I don't have time in my sessions. I do a lot of consulting for other teams. They're like, well, we don't have a full hour to dedicate speed work. Well, you don't need to. Find strategic times in warm-ups to hit these things. If you see your athletes 3, 4, 5 times a week, and you can strategically find placement of warm-ups, and when we get to top-end speed, same thing. Find strategic times to put 5, 10 minutes of these types of drills in. Without doing a speed session, you will make them more economical. They will hit better positions. You'll have them more posturally aware. And everybody wants to talk about corrective exercises. In my opinion, I think top-end speed drills and acceleration speed drills done in the right posture, the right position, the right placements are your best corrective exercise drills. It's how the body wants to move. I saw a great post the other day. It says, fish rarely get fin injuries because they swim. Birds rarely get wing injuries because they fly. Humans get a ton of running injuries, but we're made to run, but we run incorrectly. We got too many inputs. We got too many ideas. We have too many, footwear issues. We have too many things, and we try to outsmart ourselves. Just find the right positions. It's that simple. So, okay, now let's go back to drills that I know everybody here implements. Let's go into some wall drills. Okay, because I think wall drills are bastardized quite a bit. I'd like to kind of clear some things up on these. This looks like a pretty good cage for us to get around. So if I have somebody that's really struggling in finding, I can't break them from that high heel lift. If I can't break them from that high heel lift, actually, you guys want to look through some more video? You guys care to? Yes. Nothing personal in here. Okay, here we go. So let's look at this. We've got a couple athletes here. Okay, this is NFL football. Okay, getting ready for the NFL Combine. This guy creates beautiful lines. You ready? Oh, see that? Oh. He's got a right side hip out. Look, it's hard for him to get extension from right side. You see that? Left side, he gets it clean. Look at that. Right side, not quite so much. So a lot of people say, oh, they tell him to push further through that leg. That might screw him up. That might hurt him. So you got to kind of see what he gives you. Pretty good position right there.
That was just saying, comes back to me.
Oh, shit. Oh, damn it. Okay, well. All right, let's get the wall just and I'll find out. All right, so give me somebody else up here. And we're just going to get into position. So again, I'd watch from the side. So let's go ahead and set up, put your weight into the bar. And again, wall drills provide context. These are progressions that I'll do, and then I'll say, let's go sprint. Let's go sprint. I want you to feel what I'm talking about. So same thing, ear, shoulder, hip, knee, ankle. We have alignment, and then I'll say, punch your thigh up to my hand. Boom. What am I going to do? There. What did I just do there? Now I just maximize those angles I've been talking about all morning, right? Maximizing these angles. Is he at 90 degrees? Come up higher. I don't want him up there, right? I want him right about here. This is 90 degrees relative to his torso. This might be 90 degrees relative to the floor. So we got to understand, what are we talking about? Are we talking about from the floor? Are we talking about from the torso? So once the foot is up here, I've got dorsiflex. I've got good preload on the Achilles complex. I've got a good 90-degree angle at the knee. I've got a good 90-degree angle here. When I drive back into the ground, I've got 3 joints that are locked and loaded at 90 degrees driving into the ground. That's ultimately where I want to be. If we punch the knee up and we pull the heel up to the ass, to the butt, you can just see, like, it's just not pleasing to the eye anymore. Cramping? Nice. Don't do that. So what I'll do a lot of times is I'll tell an athlete, punch the knee to my hand. Boom, back down. Boom, back down. Boom, back down. All the while keeping good extension on that rear leg. Working on that range of motion to get there. Good. Other side. Now, a lot of times coaches put their hand here. Go ahead. The feedback is night and day, but a lot of people won't catch that. Oh, good, he got the thigh up. No, it's got to be forward. And look when he gets forward, look what happens to that glute when he does that. Those are the small details that I look for in these types of drills. Put out in front a little more. There. And you feel a difference. When you punch forward, you feel that there in that glute? Yeah. One more. And rest. Good. Cool. So again, these types of drills, providing context of how you want them to attack the ground. I'm setting up position to allow them to understand position as they attack into the ground. Now let's take we'll go 1 count. And be careful on these. Don't throttle the ground. If you've got an athlete or an older athlete, go ball the foot. There you go. If you've got an older athlete and they're striking that ground, this is a very aggressive eccentric load on the Achilles. So knee up, forward, and just a quick one switch. 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 Well, I'll call you. Switch. 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 And you see a little bit inconsistent pattern of where the thighs are, right? And that's where I would get in. For a drill like this, I would get in and I would still put my hand here and I'd call him to switch on me so he can feel where I want him. Now, if you see when he's coming up and he's a little bit off, you see what was happening in the hips? There's a little bit of rotation. To me, there's restriction somewhere. I don't know where. You know, I think a lot of people like to walk away and go, oh, that's his QL. Oh, that's, you don't know. There's so many, the body's so stinking complex. We can sit there and guesstimate, but we don't know. We can come up with strategies, but guess what's going to open up range of motion during this drill? Doing the drill. Doing this drill and having deliberate action to it, doing all the different posture exercises, I see it all the time. It opens up that range. Let's go again. Let's go 1 counts. Leg up, foot out in front, right there. Switch, 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 and rest. That's beautiful because the last time he did this, I wasn't going to say anything, but he fixed it without me saying anything. Last time he did this, where did he put his emphasis into the drive? Coming up. Like he was like here. He was always thinking about driving up. That last rep, he thought about driving down. And that's one thing I'll even cue with the athletes. Let's see if it works here. Start with both feet on the ground. And I'm just going to call you to lift. Okay, I'll say punch. Ready?
Hold.
Yeah, just hold. Punch. Reset. Punch. Reset. Punch. Reset. Punch. Good. Now I'll have him in the up position. Drive. Up. Drive. Go ahead and start. Yep. Drive. So where I put my emphasis of my cueing voice should tell him where I want him to be. You heard how I said up, it was quicker. Drive was more forceful. So I play around with my tones as well. If I'm working on something that is a tempo drill, did you guys hear how I talked to you today? Here we go. But if we're going into sprint, it's sharper, it's quicker, it's reactive, it's a clap, it's something like that. So I let my coaching tone, hopefully I'd say non-verbally, but hopefully it takes over for him what I really want. Okay? Let's go ahead and go back into the switches now. So now he knows that his money's made by driving into the ground. Switch! 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 Beautiful. So the very first time he did this, we didn't talk about any of this. He was really a lifty kind of guy. Now he's driving through the ground. Now let's go to a 2 count. So we'll start with right leg up. When I say switch, you'll hit two switches. Switch, 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 and rest. Good. And every time we change the complexity of the drill, we'll see different faults come back. We'll see different randomness come out. You keep doing it over and over again, those things start to go away. The errors are like this early on, and then they start to tighten up. Let's go other leg up. Foot out in front. Right there. Switch, 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 and rest. Good. We'll rest here for a second, then we'll go 1-3 count. So I'll use these as preparatory drills. These get exhausting too, don't they?
Is he better on that side than his?
I just consciously, the first one, I felt myself pulling up.
Ah,
Second
good.
one I said.
Driving down. And you saw him get a little bit better extension, the timing, everything was a little bit better. It's this guy.
Loren, when you were getting those there, Kieran, I was kind of thinking, as you were starting to look to take that leg swing away from the back, there's kind of a tipping point where it becomes more just focusing on rapid hip flexion over rapid hip extension. Do you get what I'm saying? Before he brings the legs back in, he's kind of driving up and he's losing the drive.
The finish of the push?
Yeah.
Yeah, when we were on the resisted run?
Yeah, but like, is that an angle thing?
Oh man, it's a lot of things.
Yeah.
It could be an angle thing, it could be a mobility thing, an awareness thing. There's a lot of different reasons. Just as I showed that video of my athlete right there, how on his right side restricted on that hip flexor, it could be bilateral. Like, actually I was watching him warm up. Where are you? Oh yeah. When I was watching him warm up, everything he did, he was here. Everything he did, he was drawn in. So it didn't surprise me that I'd see that when he got to drilling at all. Because usually what somebody shows you in like a walking series warm up gives you a good idea of their true range of motion that they have. Now I'm a firm believer, if you ever watch me, I teach a full warm up series and it's tall and extended on the down leg. And the reason why is I'm trying to get and open up those positions. But watching people warm up, it'll give you a good sense of what they're going to be capable of. And just as I said earlier, if we told him to really push and finish through there, it might be a recipe for disaster as well. You know, you're trying to take a tissue through a range of motion that it's not wanting to go through. So I think that rapid hip flexion might have been, one, him trying not to heel cycle right, but I also think there's more restriction there in the hip flexors as well. And one thing I hate to say it, but anytime somebody asks me a question, I can give you like usually a 3, 4, 5 drop down list of why I think. I don't know, but why I think, and I usually pay attention to mechanics in the warm up that will really lead me to start creating a little bit more of my hypothesis. 3 count. That was a nice rest. All right, and switch, switch, switch. Switch. Good. And I get very deliberate with these. Those are good piston actions. Let me jump. Those are really good piston actions, but I'm very deliberate where it's here, where you still see he's getting a little bit of this, and then he gets to the right position. But I really try to get it to these angles. Even though that might just account for 1 or 2 steps, to groove it over and over again is the only way we'll make it habitual, in my opinion. Now, I know Ian's going to touch on these things, but even when we look at multi-directional work, if an athlete is coming from a shuffle, a back pedal, they've got to hit these same angles in these same positions. And that's my contention, is most athletes, almost every time you watch them out of a change of direction, they almost watch any field play, they almost always go back and deviate into a cyclical action. And you know what the crazy thing is? Think about this. You've got cleats, you're bedded in the ground, and you do that. Fuck yeah. Oh shit, sorry. Is this live? Is this live?
No.
Is there a 10-second
No,
delay?
we're good.
But think about that. That's where you can get that acute hamstring. And we always talk about, you know, overreaching, but again, it's bedding into that. The other thing I'll say about cleat wear, and that's why I love running on Mondo and tennis shoes. Cleats, you can actually get away with some really bad mechanics because the cleats will allow you to. You don't slip nearly as often. You won't have that stumble effect. You run on Mondo and tennis shoes, you better hit the right positions or else you're going to eat it. And we saw that with the Dow sprints, especially that very first one when you had to really find it. But cleats allow you to have really bad mechanics sometimes and still keep your footing. and it's far from optimal. So, I don't, what time is it here?
It is 10:48.
10:48. I've been going for a while. Why don't we grab like a 3-4 minute break and let's come back and let's touch on top end speed. You guys have questions? I mean, I think we've been answering questions as we go.
Is the bad running style learned behavior? Like if you get a toddler, does he run well and then become a bad runner, or do you have to train someone to be a sprinter?
Man, that's a good one. I think the potentially, I don't want to sit here and say inherently we move poorly, because we're creatures of survival. Okay, now I will say that some people pick the right parents. I will say that some people kind of figure it out. I will say we have a lot of bad coaching. I think there's a lot of bad coaching at times that creates bad positions, bad ideas. Get on your toes, same thing. Get on your toes, strike on your toes, reach for distance, increase that stride length. You know, some of us who are a little bit older, you know, the track coaches in the 80s, what they tell us to do to increase our stride length. Reach for it, reach for it. Well, now it's more of a propulsive mechanism. How far are the hips traveling? So I think there's an element of bad coaching in there as well. Yeah, I think there's an element of bad coaching within it.
So a guy who's being coached more is more likely to be, if the coach isn't good, he's going to have a bad style as opposed to
Potentially.
beginner then.
I think potentially. I can say this, and I use, you know, American football as my reference point. One, we have some amazing athletes in there, okay? We have some genetic freaks. We have some of the fastest athletes in the world, aside from track and field. However, I will say this, is these guys who are coming into me for the draft process and trying to run their fastest in a 40-meter distance, run poorly. They run poorly. So they've got some genetic, God-given abilities, but from a technical proficiency, they're still way off the mark. Way off the mark. And I don't know why that is. I do think it's lack of, I can speak in our country, it's a lack of primary education, of getting these gross motor tasks. I can't tell you how many kids we bring in middle school and high school that can't skip. They cannot skip. I mean, that to me, skipping is the foundation. My NFL athletes, I can't tell you, like we spend all day skipping and reinforcing because they don't even do it that well. And so one, we always want to reinforce those coordinative tasks, but reestablish something that maybe wasn't set down in the foundation for some of these athletes as well. Clearly, you know, some of these elites have made it to the elite levels, and it's because of God-given ability, sometimes not on a technical proficiency ability either. So
Probably like those athletes because you know you can work with them.
100%, and you know what? And they make the changes and they feel the changes, and it's with those genetics. I always say, you take a nice chassis to a car and you put up a supercharged engine, it runs better. But a lot of people's thought process is, let's take a beat up VW and let's put a supercharged engine in it and see what see how efficient it is. You know, that's a lot of people's thought process. I don't need to make people run better. I just need to make them stronger. It's the same concept. To me, let's work on the aesthetics of the car, the dynamics of the car, the fluidity of the car, and the engine size.
One of the big problems is what you touched on earlier. For coaching teams, it's time and applying the time and knowing there's a value in it. Because if you watch a field sport kid at 14 or 15 who has a track background, you can tell looking at the running mechanics because it's on the pitch where the time has been spent for that child in development.
Yeah, and where do you guys see that tipping point, right? Because we work with a club soccer team back in the States, and it's a very good club, and their ages from 8 all the way to 18. And I went in with this whole pitch to these coaches of, here's what we want to do. They come in, they watch our sessions, they go, we get it, but we don't want it. I was like, wait a minute, you understand? And so finally what I said to them was, you clearly don't care about the development of your athletes. The good are going to be good, and forget everybody else. And the other thing I told them, I said, if not now, when? If not now, when? The window of opportunity right now to make these things good is right now. And we can make those changes as they get older, but it's harder. And so for me, it's a constant battle we have in the States of, to your point, it's a time thing, but also, I get it, but I don't care. Is it like that here or no?
I think it is.
Yeah. Okay.
Will you generally know, or like say you're talking there, if you've maybe 20 guys coming into you before the combine, say if 3's from Florida State and 2's, will you generally know that these guys from Florida State have been involved in a good college program, so they're going to be maybe there's only a few things to tidy up? Or is there you look at your list coming in and you like, oh no, he's going to be hard to work with because you just have to break everything down again?
Yeah, you know what, you get a real sense the first day you lift in the weight room. You get a sense when we go to pull off the racks or pull from the floor, you're like, oh my goodness. Some guys get it, they nail it, and some guys it's like they've never approached a bar. So it is tough. The funny thing is the guys who haven't been too good at it, we do the same thing. We pull we go back to block 0 with them, reach each patterns, and then they start to put together. But as fundamental as we know approaching the bar and pulling correctly is, none of these guys, I don't care what program, know how to jump. And that's the most mind-boggling. Like they think I might hit my head, but they think jump is like this lift thing, and they don't understand it's this tension thing. They don't understand how to sequence things and how to use elasticity. It's crazy to me. So even the most, again, it goes back to what we said about fundamentals. We can sit here and go, oh yeah, he knows how to run, he knows how to jump. But when I get them in these windows, they don't. And these are the best of the best. And people are like, well, how do you make 4 or 5 inch difference in a vertical jump? Well, some of it's some of our strategy, but a lot of it's like sequence, timing.
And they buy into that, like, because that 4 or 5 inches could be the difference in a multi-million-pound contract and not.
Yeah, we had a kid this year who came in, and he's a stud. He's 294 pounds, so 133 kilos, and he came in 27-inch vert. And I'm like, and he's got way more power than that. He's at 33 right now. A 33-inch vertical jump, he's 6-inch vertical jump in 5 weeks' time because he's learning how to sequence. That's it. I haven't done anything magical. Just teaching how to, tempo rhythms of the arms and the hips and the head, and then how to create stiffness to get extension. So many of these kids are so everybody's planning for push through the toes, and I'm the opposite. I say pull up through the toes because I want to create stiffness through the posterior chain, create that bow effect. Boom. That's what I want to create. And so everybody sees the end result, the toe off. And so what happens, they have slack in the hips when they try to drive into extension. Same thing that happens in sprint. They're so concerned with toe off that they don't get this guy. The sequence is wrong. Just like when you see somebody clean, light, their timing, the sequence is wrong because the weight's so light if they don't understand technique, right? What do you see them do? You see them get to the toes before they even get to their second pull. They're here instead of there. So it's reteaching sequences, so much of it. Back to postural restoration, things like that, getting away from some of the repetitive strengths of their sport, and then I just blend them into their skill work. Now, if I see them trying to be too track and field-ish, I've got to talk to them about, hey, remember your sport is, you got to stay into the ground, you got to be able to drop the hips, you got to be able to transition out. So I have got to I haven't been on this whole time? Damn.
We just have to start the whole morning presentation.
Yeah. No, I said the F word twice.
Keep beating up to ours.
So I think you have to speak to them about the constraints of what they're on. My baseball players, same thing. Think of the surface they're pushing into. They're pushing into dirt when they're running the base path. Well, if you're one of these guys and you're a heavy toe finish guy and you're really going to lag into backside loss or backside leak, then you're pushing into a restraint that's going to give anyway. I've worked with a lot of baseball players that were chronic, adductor osteitis, hip flexor guys, because somebody was telling them to finish that push through the toe on an unstable restraint. So simple things like paying attention to what surfaces they're on and what gives they're going to have and how that's going to influence bad mechanics as well. So putting all that in the part where the specificity of the surface becomes a huge thing to transition them into. I will say I like it when my NFL players come back from season. We go barefoot, we go tennis shoes, we get them out of what they've been in, we get them off those surfaces, get them onto, I don't want to say softer surfaces, but a different surface. And when I reintroduce like different concepts of deceleration, oh my God, those guys have spent so much time of start, stop, and practice and gameplay that we're really low intensity on any type of deceleration. All I try to do is restore bend on those guys. Doesn't matter the surface we're on, and then ultimately, once I transition back onto the field, then getting them back indoctrinated into their cleat wear, everything like that. Because again, even cleats will change like your functionality of your foot. And that we talked about earlier, the foot can't just be stiff and rigid. It's got to have the ability to have some sort of compliance to be able to move through all three phases of the foot and work through all the different axes to then give you that springboard action that you want within the right timing and sequencing. So I keep surfaces novel to a degree, but then understand when you've got to get more specific and get ready for the season. Okay, so now we're going to go into like more of the transitional or maximum velocity type mechanics. And as we talked about with the acceleration, it's really a hybrid of what happens anyway, from acceleration to maximum velocity. There's a continuation or a spectrum that they'll all go through. You don't just have this piston-based thing and then the cyclical-based thing. They morph. But the same rules apply when I'm teaching it from a technical model to my athletes. Is we start first and foremost with posture. Posture is our setup, and we look at from ear all the way down to shoulder, hip, knee, and ankle. And what I do is I force the athletes to get tall on the down leg. So their non-working leg, I need them tall. And the reason why I do that is that way I can just scrape into the ground without blocking the heel into the ground. But the other thing is I get better activation of the gluteus medius. We all know that the gluteus medius does what? It abducts the hip. That's what it does in open stance. We talked about action of pronation, supination, and open stance, close stance. In open stance, the gluteus medius abducts the hip. What does it do in close stance? It supports the pelvis laterally, right? Gluteus medius not engaged, gluteus medius engaged. It gives us hip height, it gives us stride length, it gives us better symmetry and positioning of the hip to allow us to have better push and drive through the glute max. So they're going to be tall on the down leg, and from here I have them just brush. They just swing the leg back and forth because I want them to feel the slight extension, and then I have them pull into a light cycle. And all I'm trying to get them, a lot of times you'll see athletes that will work on these pawing drills, and they're always here, what is this? They're always locked in this hip flexion patterning. To me, extension has to happen, knee flexion, then hip flexion. Here, I never get extension. I'm just working on knee flexion into hip flexion. So I want to get extension here. A lot of times you'll see drilling, and the drilling is opposing the true mechanics. We push, and then we recover. So again, one more time. I lightly extend here, and then I pull the heel up and through. Now it's the same rules apply. I'm trying to teach a habit of not letting drift happen once I push through, because as we talked about, there's backside leaks. If I leak backside, what's going to happen front side? I'm going to be shallow on my thigh position. Everything's based around timing. So teaching the athletes anticipatory firing. Cycle, strike the ground, pull up. So that's the concept I'm looking for when I'm teaching top end speed. I still want my athletes to push through, but understanding now how quickly can I put the bullet back in the chamber. Right? This is pulling the bullet back in the chamber, this is hitting the hammer down. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and just have a few of you just set up to the racks, and just think about one being tall on the down leg and just feeling that pattern. Now, one thing a lot of people will do on this as well, let me show what typically happens incorrectly. It's a hip flexion based recovery, where they'll cycle back and then go hip flexion first. I like to proceed this with knee flexion into hip flexion, knee flexion into hip flexion. As the thigh comes back, the heel starts to drift up toward the rear, and then we pull through with the thigh. So let's go ahead and pull up, maybe 4 or 5 of you. Just play around with 6 to 8 reps a side. Now notice every time my leg swung back. Yeah, this is good to see. Yeah, just go ahead and play around on your own. But frame that figure 4 position up top. Good, hold and frame. Now pay attention what you see in the lumbo-pelvic complex. When they go through their swing leg, how much dumping do you see through the lumbo-pelvic complex? Every time they swing the leg back, you'll see a collapse. More of a instability here. Like if somebody's doing like a cat-cow or doing a quadruped scorpion, and they're always leaking like a hyperlordotic position, they're losing a little bit of stiffness or stability through the torso. There you go. And you'll see different recovery habits, right? You'll see more of a thigh flexion or hip flexion recovery habit. How many people in here have worked athletes post ACL? Right now? How are the rules here? In the rules in the States, they're braced for a very long time. And that's usually a CYA. How are they here? Are they
What do you mean with brace?
knee brace? No? Good. So in the States, what happens is they get knee braced early, and then the doctors will say, hey, go back to running. And so what happens when they wear the knee brace is it blocks knee flexion, and so all the recovery action becomes very thigh flexion like you were, where you were here, and you didn't precipitate knee flexion into hip flexion. So what happens is they stereotype their recovery mechanics based on this blocking from the brace. You take them out of the brace, guess what they do?
Same thing.
Same damn thing. They've patterned it. So in the States, what we do is we take them out of the brace, and we just sit here and work on these drills right here, just these pawing walking drills. Now, what we'll do is once the athletes start to really, to me, this is an awareness thing, this is a feel thing, and this is a great drill to teach the athletes not to overtry. We saw people and we heard people that were overtrying on this drill, right? This is a very simple, low intensity drill that's really fluid. And as they start to get it really well, holding on to something passive, then we make it a little bit more active and integrated. So holding position. And I'm barely brushing the ground, but I'm still working that habit of knee flexion into hip flexion, and always making sure I finish up at the figure 4 position with foot and dorsiflexion. Again, to me, a lot of times in field sport, as athletes start to get trashed with their ankles, as they start to have repetitive ankle sprains, things like that, they start to lose range of motion and dorsiflexion. When athletes start to lose dorsiflexion, what do they lose the ability to do on the field? Bend. They lose the ability to have good sudden bend, and the angles at which they accelerate are now compromised. So maintaining dorsiflexion, whether it's soft tissue work, palpation work, talus releases, but just actively working on dorsiflexion. Now, one thing that you'll find too is you can't be biased to the dorsiflexion that you see. A lot of times we see people in shoes and we have them dorsiflex. And do me a favor, you guys just stand here and just dorsiflex one foot for me. Okay, can you take off your shoe? Now, I think I see what I'm about to talk about. Yeah. So what you'll see in a lot of people, look at that, that's awesome right there. You see how he's dorsiflexing his foot? If you actually look at his midfoot's plantar flexed. It's his forefoot that's dorsiflexing. So dorsiflexion needs to come from the talocrural joint, from the actual malleoli, and you get, I don't know the history of ankle sprains, I'm sure you played sports and shit like that, but if I look at a lot of people dorsiflex their foot, they dorsiflex through the phalanges. When you dorsiflex to the forefoot, your midfoot plantar flexes. So now effectively you're actually losing dorsiflexion from the ankle joint itself, from the rear foot where it truly matters. Because that's where we get all that pre-tension loading is from the rear foot. So make sure you take your athletes out of their shoe wear at times and pay attention where they're getting their dorsiflexion from. If they're getting their dorsiflexion from the forefoot or the phalanges, you guys know what I'm talking about?
Just could you show us?
I'll show. Yep. So you'll see them do this.
Yeah. You want?
You'll see it do that through the phalanges. Where you'll see the midfoot is plantar flexed. Now that's dorsiflexion, right? But a lot of times if you see an athlete and you have them dorsiflex with shoe wear on and you see that big toe kick up into the top of their shoe, take their shoe off and see where it's really coming from. Because that's a lot of times what you'll see is that. You'll see that midfoot dropping into plantar flexion. But that has a whole deal of the compliancy of how that foot and really needs to, we talked about pronation and supination earlier today, and pronation needs to happen. If you have somebody that's got a foot like that, it's people go, oh, that's awesome, you got a high arch. No, it's not a good foot. You've seen some of the fastest people in the world down at Altus, they're flat-footed, but they're stiff and stable.
It's rotten feet, like
it's like a board. Yeah, it's like a board. But a lot of times you see people with these high contour arches, they're getting their dorsiflexion from the wrong place. That midfoot needs to come down and splay into the floor. And that's something we actually do want. Now there's a difference. If you see like a dancer and they have something called ankle equinus, when you see them on a table and they've got this high arch and then you stand them up and they go flat as a pancake but it's collapsed, that is an unstable foot. But a lot of elite sprinters have a flat, stable, rigid foot. Big difference. But pay attention where that dorsiflexion comes from, because as they start to lose dorsiflexion, they'll lose the ability to bend. And when I mean bend, I'm not talking just side to side, the ability to drop the hips as they're going into deceleration here. If you don't have good dorsiflexion as you go to put on the brakes here, then you run into greater shearing forces at the knee anytime you go to put on the brakes. And it's harder for you to get in and out of a brake as well if you don't have that element of ability to get the foot down into the ground and then get the angles. I said it earlier when we talked, somebody asked about angle of acceleration and how long you can hold a lean. And what did I say it was relative to? Strength. Two things. Relative strength and angled mobility. Oh yeah, length too.
No, ankle. I said ankle.
Oh, did you say ankle? Yeah, ankle mobility. Ankle mobility will set up where that shin is able to go to, and then relative strength. The guys who have higher vertical jumps, guess what they can do? They can carry their acceleration further. Yeah. So pay attention to those aspects. So let's go ahead and do the.
How trainable have you found that though? Like the foot, like have you had guys come in like your NFL guys and that foot's a disaster and you've done some work?
Yeah.
And what would that work look like in terms of?
That's great. So I look at a couple things. I have a kid right now. He's 320 pounds. He's had 2 Liz Franck surgeries. If you look at his foot, he's exactly what I was talking about, where his midfoot is arched up high, where you would think, oh, stable, good arch, but and his flanges are pulled up this way. He's got a horrible foot. He's got a foot that's non-compliant. It doesn't splay. It doesn't push down into the ground, because it's just like any contraction. You need to have eccentric and concentric. He's always locked into concentric. So he's a guy that as he's lost about 15 pounds now, and now he's less collapsing, right? That's the part I didn't talk about. When we did that whole pronation, supination thing earlier, when we pronated our foot, what did our tibia do? Do it real quick. Rotate, and then feel what your tibial tuberosity does when you pronate. It internally rotates, okay? When people talk ACL injuries and ACL tears, and oh my God, he's got valgus, it's not the medial knee collapse, it's the rotational mechanism. That's the one, the body has a hard time. The body actually does pretty damn good at controlling shear and that medial valgus. It's the rotational force, it's the torque that has a hard time controlling. And you don't have a lot of time of rotation before something bad happens.
That way sometimes people that strap their ankles can be more prone to
100%. Because if you block motion, you've got to get some. So now do this. Great. Now do this. Pronate both feet. Keep them pronated. Now rotate. You can't rotate as far. Supinate both feet. Now rotate. You can't rotate as far. When you just supinated both feet, guess what you just did? You just casted yourself in orthotics. That's basically what they do, is they lock you into supination. And when you do that, you feel everything up the chain. You have less rotation, less movement. Because when we look at rotational athletes, we should pronate, and then I have more ability to rotate. You take that away, you have to pick it up somewhere else, or it will either block range of motion elsewhere. Or I guess if you block range of motion, you're going to have to pick it up somewhere else. You felt that it took you away, so what you'd have to do, you'd have to try harder to get through a greater rotational area. So to your point, people that spat, people that tape, they lose that ankle mobility, they set themselves up for some significant...
Like in the NFL, you see a team on the field and 80% of them have tape over their cleats.
Yep, yeah. And I think the way I can see where they come from on that. It's like there's so much trash that you're stepping on, that's how they say, well, we just got to bolster it, right?
Right.
But as we all know, you start to weaken those tissues as well. The other thing that we talked about when we look at the foot and the hip, how many degrees of freedom did the foot and the hip have? They have 3. They have 3. We got flexion, extension, ab and adduction, internal, external rotation in the hip. And we have the same thing in the foot, but as I said, in the foot we have 3 phases: rear foot, midfoot, forefoot, and all those phases simultaneously will have all 3. You have a lot of freaking motion, and what do you have caught in between? The knee. Why does everybody talk about the knee? Because it's the victim of what these guys can't stabilize and be strong for. So the knee takes the brunt of it. So paying attention to ankle mobility and hip stability really is the best way to bulletproof the knee.
Question for you on that one, Lauren, as well. Is it possible to separate that dorsiflexion in a squat, like to not get the full range of motion in a squat through true dorsiflexion and pick it up midfoot, or is it always just going to be naturally true dorsiflexion?
You know, well, like if they're doing a squat and you're saying if they have that higher foot,
Yeah, for instance, that issue that you saw come up with me there, is it possible that in my squat I'm not correctly dorsiflexing as well?
I would say you probably squat a little more abducted and toed out. Is that right? To get there?
Naturally I would,
Yeah. And most people probably do anyway, but that's probably how you would counterbalance that inability. Because as you squat down, if the more vertical you are this way or more straight ahead, the more dorsiflexion you have to get. Well, if you don't got it, you're going to pick it up through another plane. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
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 Because that foot should, so here's what should happen. The foot should splay, the tibia should move forward, the femur should sit back. You block here, so you've got to do something to open that up, and you're going to open it up through a rotation of the hip is my guess. That's my guess.
I would in socks on that floor. I would, yeah.
Yeah, I bet they windshield wipe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not why the FMS is feet forward because it tends.
I don't.
That's got to do with standardization.
I was going to say standardizing a start
Two
position.
things of standardization and internal rotation of hip, not if you straight foot, but standardization is the main reason Greg did that, because if we told people toe out, one lad comes
How do you
straight ahead.
then how do you score,
Yeah.
right?
How do you score?
If you don't have a start position.
Standardization is the main reason.
And the one thing that I think is crazy, right? Because we can tell someone like me, if you were to put me on the table right now and test me in hip internal rotation, I have 0. So you tell me, if I squat here, you say turn your feet straight ahead. Now you just further internally rotated me. So that just goes, and I'm bilateral that way. So I'm more anteverted in my femurs. And so just understanding like the pure birth positions that somebody can come from, like, and you say, hey, get your toes straight ahead, and now you've just really put somebody in a bad position. Yeah. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There's a standardization of it.
And like a lot of people then were like, oh, so we have to squat our feet forward. Gray's like, no.
Yeah.
Just for strength.
Exactly. The pendulum shifts, right? And people think this is how you do it. Yeah. And then a lot of people start having back injuries and things like that because now you're trying to rob Peter to pay Paul to get lower.
Just on that, Lauren. So in your sort of eyes, how many inappropriately prescribed orthotics are you seeing for athletes? Because that probably goes to the typical, doctor who specializes in feet, and if they don't have like a well-versed background in physical preparation, they think, oh, your foot's flat, you need an arch to get that up, and maybe that's what makes it magic.
Yeah.
Like going back to sprinters.
It's funny because I see people that have like an acute injury, like say you have a Lisfranc strain. It's not a tear, but you have a strain. Hey, get in an orthotic, protect it so you don't keep splaying and making it worse. Got it, get it, understood. But I think a lot of times it's a quick Band-Aid. Hey, wear this. Oh, guess what? My plantar fasciitis is gone, but now my back hurts really bad. So I think what happens is it's one of those things that can take things away acutely, but then it can have a chain effect for sure. One thing that I do with my athletes a lot, and probably twice a week, is we go through either barefoot warm-up, barefoot cool-downs. And we'll play even on stupid, like, I know people hate them, but ladders, like we'll play around on tempo drills on ladders barefoot. Why not? Like, it's not a bad tool. Like, understand, like, I think it's funny, people will bag on a ladder, but then they'll turn around and do like line hops. I'm like, what's the difference? What's the difference? So, understanding what the tool is for, and just rehearsing patterns and trying to teach the foot to be compliant with how to load under low intensity. So, again, that's why I really went on a good segue there on the foot, but I think it's important. I think anybody can come in and show you drills, and we're going to get into some more, but I think it's those finite details of what I'm talking about with strike position and how that foot hits and what available ranges of motion there are. A lot of athletes will work around an inability. A lot of athletes that you do see strike 4th and 5th, guess what they can't do? They can't dorsiflex. They can't dorsiflex, so the first thing that ultimately hits the ground is here. And now you think of the muscles that actually dorsiflex your foot, you have your anterior tibialis, you have your proneus tertius, and then you have your extensor digitorum, extensor hallucis. If you don't have good activation of all those guys, you don't get as clean a dorsiflexion. So like your proneus tertius is going to give you more abduction and dorsiflexion. So that's going to change the degree. So paying attention to where the dorsiflexion is coming from, you do me a favor. You remember the drill we did here? Do it for me in place. Yeah. Yeah. So he's exactly what I was just talking about. You see where he gets his dorsiflexion from. It's more on this abducted positioning. And I don't know why. We don't know why. It could be a talus position. It could be
Is it
just
both leg or just left leg?
both.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's for sure both. You want to do it again? Yeah. And I noticed that earlier when every time we do the drill and you'd always end right here. And I'm not saying that's a bad way, but I think a lot of times athletes find out how to get to their positions where they can provide force. But two, I always look at like, what's your range of motion like? I would take you down, assess where the talus is neutral, and then see what your available passive dorsiflexion is like then. And see if it's something that can ultimately be retrainable. You know, can it be? So sometimes just a lack of awareness of it too.
Obviously individual dependent, but what's your kind of favorite dorsiflexion drills or moves?
I have none. Like mobs, like I'm a big kind of find, talus neutral. Once I find talus neutral, then I'll do like a 4-foot pumping, mid-foot pumping, and a rear foot pumping, a mid-foot pumping, and then a 4-foot pumping. But I hold on to talus neutral the whole time.
Like Jerry's?
Yeah, pretty similar. The exercise, like people like do like banded shit all the time. It's like, no, just be aware. Like in our warm-ups, everything we do, it's like toe up. And that's why I do all the drills we did this morning. Like it's everything was quick exchange, and holding the toe up position. Because to me, a lot of people when they like, oh, I've got shin splints. A lot of times it's soreness of the anterior tibialis and the extensor digitorum. Anterior tibialis is right on the shank there, and then your extensor digitorum hallucis are right here. It's like DOMs. It's basically DOMs of those tissues, and people haven't been working on dorsiflexion. So, and the funny thing is too, where other people complain of shin splints, is right underneath the tibia, right? Underneath the tibia here. What attaches there? Posterior tibialis and your flexor digitorum flexor hallucis. So it could be just your strike pattern in the ground. You start hitting people, when people start hitting ball of foot, they start hitting the right sequences, the right positions, a lot of that stuff goes away. It's crazy. When you train the body to be more elastic and you hit the right positions to be more elastic, it moves more fluidly. It's not the loud crashing sound of the ground. That could traditionally be compartment syndrome or lead into shin splints as well. But honestly, just making them aware of those positions all the time. What time? How much time do I have? Ian's supposed to start at 12? Is it lunch at 12? Let's go through a couple of drills now. We'll get back to who wants to do them with the dowels again? Sure. We just need a couple people. Remember, drills provide context, but drills also work on special strength as well, like in what we're talking about with dorsiflexion position, but more importantly, what's happening in stance leg. So just grab the dowels. Do I have like one or two people that want to do this? You'll do this really well, I promise you. Because I watched you earlier. Because you're more of a cyclical guy. So now we're going to start with the dowel back here, and now we're going to take it into that cyclical pattern. So now I'm trying to hold that paused position every time. So I'm here, stick, here, stick. Now I'm allowing that heel to come up, and now I frame at that figure 4 again. So one thing, pay attention, it's not the speed at which you go down, it's the decent frequency of the leg, but it's more about holding position. Hold position. Yep, I'm actually pulling, I'll watch from the side. I'm actually pulling up, and then through. Because that's what we're trying to teach the athletes. Once they've toed off, once they've pushed off, then it's pulled back through without having big backside drift. Good, head up. Again, wherever the eyes go, the hips go. Pull the foot out in front of you. Good. Cycle that leg a little more. Actually let that heel now come up to the butt a little bit. Good, walk back. Let it come up just a little bit more. So yeah, a little bit more. So different from what we did earlier. Ready. And go. There you go. Heel pulls up to the butt a little bit more here, now pull through. There you go. Left side, right side, feeling good. So I pay attention to each guy, and one leg might be more of that knee flexion and the hip flexion recovery, and one might be more just hip flexion. So I pay attention to that. I do look for symmetry of that, because understanding that the whole sprint stride is about timing. So we'll come on back. We'll take it in the drill, put the PVCs down. And now we'll incorporate a little arm action. We'll go into a drill that I call it, as I said, I don't work with sprinters. I work with field-based athletes. So I try to work a couple drills that touch on top-end speed and allow them to have the awareness of what I want them to do at top-end speed, but very rarely will I say, here's what I want you to do. So provide them context and let them figure it out. So tall through the hips, they're gonna pull the heel right up underneath the rear end and arm action back. So tall, I'm not beating the crap out of the ground. I'm tall, pulling the heel. I'm almost smashing my hamstring and my calf. There you go. Walk it back. Try to do me a favor. So when you do this, your hips do that. Just look up. Okay? Just look down, maybe down at those boxes. And at the same tempo, relax the upper body. Nice. We'll come on back. And then we'll transition it into a series of dribbles. So similar to the PVC, to the dowel, and now we're just gonna, the dribbles are actually very hard. You're gonna step over, opposite ankle, opposite shin, opposite knee. The whole time I'm striking, how am I striking? Toes, full foot, step over, step over, step over. Then I take it up, but it's the same habit. It's cyclical. I'm not doing this. I'm actually building off of what I did on the rack, where I went here, here, here. And now I'm just building it up the chain.
I'm straight and going back.
Yeah. This is a hard drill. That was really good. As you get going, try not to get here. Try to stay more vertical. You had a history of track in your day?
I do Masters track.
Oh, do you now? Oh, good.
Again?
Yep. And you can take it from the over ankle. Normally I would spend a ton of repetition just at over ankle, mid shin, and then over thigh. And you can see two different positions here, right? Clearly we have somebody who probably does a lot of this drilling. I'm sure you do a decent amount of it, but you're pretty dumped down in the hips. You guys see the difference in hip carriage? So those things will show themselves in the PVC work. We saw it. Every time he went to his single leg balance, he was here. When we do that PVC work, the number one position was this. I talked about that dump of the gluteus medius and the trunk complex, here to here. And those are the things I'm looking for in how well can you be resilient to those ground reactive forces when you strike on that support leg. As I said, normally when I teach these, it will be just step over ankle for a full set, step over mid shin, and then step over knee. So, but that's a real nice skill to play around with, is changing your heights as you go. Go from ankle, mid shin, knee, and then back down. As the athletes become more coordinated with it, play around with that. Go ahead. Tall, tall, tall. There. Good. And joint, we said it earlier, joint position dictates muscle function, and that's why I just keep telling you to get tall, because as you start to go here, you don't get as good of extension back into the ground like that co-contraction hamstring. I think there's a lot. I think it could be strike point. It could be stability of the foot. It could be so many different things. All I'm saying is, if you're doing something slow and deliberate, pay attention to this whole up and extended positioning. Okay. Now, obviously top end speed would be a hard one for us to do right here. If you guys have ever worked on the curved treadmills, those are a great piece. Have you guys seen the curves, the Woodway curves? It's a great piece because you can cue them in real time, and the belt itself has good feedback to you. If you drift backside on a curve, guess what's going to happen? You're going to eat crap, just like the PVCs. That PVC was feedback for you to punch and get the hips extended but punch the knee forward. On the curve, when you push through that belt, if you don't pull back and get the thigh back up, you're going to eat. You're going to have more moment falling forward. Same thing, it's got good feedback in how you strike the ground. If you strike and reach, the feedback on the belt, you won't be able to drive with as much oomph into it. So if you have access to those, I think those are some of the best drills to go back and forth on with top end speed drilling. Clearly a lot of people will go to a track and they'll do build-ups and banking runs, some lead-in runs. But the curves are nice because I can give real-time feedback to the athlete. As they're going full stride, I can explain to them, hey, check the left arm back just a tad more. I can give them a simple cue. We'll go one more time through the drill. Go one more time through ankle, knee, and hip. Boom. Tall, tall. Beautiful. And what we'll do is we'll then go ahead and do a series of drilling, and we'll turn around and we'll get on the treadmill. So everything that we just talked about, as far as once they push through the belt, get back up to the loaded position. So that way I can give them that instant feedback, but also show them the context of drill to execution. Now earlier I said that one of the biggest flaws I see in team sports is how we condition them linearly. We typically condition them very, very far, and so what happens if a coach says, all right, we're gonna run 80, 60, 100, what do athletes do? Right? They heel, stroke, and plod for their acceleration, and they just start building up. So one, the mechanics that we deem are the most important in sport on field play is acceleration. They don't get any repetitions of. So that's why earlier I said be the master of execution of 5 to 10 meters. Understand how to attack the ground, understand angles, understand projection. But then if you are looking to do some things that are more conditioning based, do them for the time's sake and look for a coordinate task. Talked about transferable, dynamic correspondence. We need to have an exercise that has a mechanical similarity to the skill. We need to have a coordinative similarity to the skill, and we need to have an energetic similarity to the skill, right? So let's do this. You guys are gonna do a step over knee. We'll call it an A run, and you're not gonna pass me. You're gonna keep it with my tempo, okay? Ready? I'm gonna walk backwards.
Drill we just did.
The drill, but just go to the step over knee.
Yeah.
Okay? And you're not passing me. And go. Over the knee, yep. There you go, hold your tempo. Still get the frequency, but hold the tempo. Time, we'll walk it back. So just, again, working from a time component, the body doesn't understand distance, it understands time. I'm working from a time component, 10, 15, 20 seconds, whatever that was. Walk back, work a 1 to 3, 1 to 2, whatever work rest intervals you want, and go back to it. Go back to it. People say, oh, there's no force in that. There's no force in freaking conditioning either. So pick your battle. Would you rather do the mechanics right, from a coordinative standpoint, a mechanical standpoint, and then put your money in the bank later on the velocity and the force aspect into the ground? That's about a 1 to 2, 1 to 3 work rest. Let's go one more. And begin. Step over the knee, cycle the leg, stay tall and relaxed, taller in the hip. There we go. And a little less toey on your strike. There you go, keep going, keep going. Don't pass me, don't pass me, don't pass me. Time. Beautiful. And what do we know that happens when we get, what's the first thing to leave us when we get fatigued? Coordination. Yeah, coordination. Coordination. So guess what I do? When my athletes are smashed from like running a curved treadmill, running banks on the track, we come back when they're smashing and we drill. We drill.
Because you're putting them in a fatigue situation and you want skill execution.
And then I want recall of the skill. While they're smashed, can you execute while you're smashed? And guess what? it's pretty damn safe. Pretty damn safe. Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you very much. Guys, I think that's all my time. I think I went over a little bit, but I think we touched on some cool subjects today on regarding like foot position and things like that are pretty lengthy conversations that have a lot of levels to them. So thank you for your time today. Hope you enjoyed, some of the skills. Like I said, when I'm looking at linear mechanics, I have 3 to 4 drills from an acceleration standpoint, 3 to 4 drills from a top end speed standpoint. People say, oh, what do you put your arm action drill in? They're in everything we just did. You can kneel and do arm actions. I have no problem with that, and I have to do that with a lot of my combine guys who are really erratic and don't understand arm action. But if you understand fluidity and motion and skipping and timing, a lot of times you'll figure out those arms. I have no problem with going into like kneeling arm actions with athletes. That's fine. I'm not a fan of seated arm action because I think athletes shortchange their arms because they don't go through the range that they normally would because they'd be hitting the ground. Plus, what happens when you take a seat on your butt? You're taking out the hips. What do you do to the thoracic? Yeah, your thoracic spine is going to go more kyphotic, right? So getting back into an extended position is where I want them to work their arm swing from. You put them in a kyphotic position, they internally rotate the humerus, and now their arm swing tends to check out even more than it has to. So again, getting them more into an extended thoracic spine position when I'm doing arm action. Thank you guys. I appreciate your time. Thank you guys. Thank you guys.